honestly could not believe I was being paid to do what I was doing. It was the most exhilarating, wonderful feeling to be able to wake up each day and absolutely love what I was going to do that day.
Hi everyone, Jeffrey Wang here, and you're listening to the PDF podcast. The Professional Development Forum, or PDF for short, was established to help diverse young professionals reach their potential in the modern Australian workplace. In this episode, we talk to Valerie Khoo, who has a portfolio career as an artist, writer, and entrepreneur, in addition to being the CEO of the Australian Writers Centre. Valerie started her career as an accountant for PwC and was a journalist who wrote for Fairfax for 15 years. She is now a working artist and designer. For the past 2 years, Valerie was the City of Sydney's curator for the Sydney Lunar New Year Festival, an arts and cultural festival that attracts more than 1.5 million people. Valerie says she unwittingly shaped her career through instinct and passion, but also learned some tough truth along the way. Today, she will reveal 5 pearls of wisdom she wished someone had told her when she was starting out. So please join me as I explore with Valerie exactly how we can apply this advice to our own careers. Good afternoon, Valerie. Did I miss any highlight of your career?
No, I think you summarised it quite well. Thank you.
You definitely have one of those careers that's a bit out of the box.
Yeah, it's different, that's for sure, and it's very varied. But I enjoy every minute of it, so I feel very lucky.
Awesome. So, if you had a time machine, Val, what would you have
Yes.
told the 18 or 20-year-old Valerie Khoo?
Oh boy, so many things, so many things. And I think the question is, would the 18 or 20-year-old Valerie Khoo have listened? But I suspect I would have, or at least listened to some of it. And I guess the thing is that at the time, I didn't have mentors or role models, or certainly if they existed in my life, I didn't recognize them as such. Maybe some people wanted to be. And I didn't seek them out either, even though I knew intellectually what they were.
Mhm.
I didn't seek out any mentors or role models, and I didn't get sort of those kind of pearls of wisdom career-wise from my parents. They were great in shaping, my values and that sort of thing on a personal level, but they didn't really have a great deal of advice for me professionally. So yeah, it's something that I've learned a lot along the way, just through my own mistakes and through my own experience. And these are the things that, I wish someone had told me a lot earlier in life, because then, I do realize that some people have those mentors. I know people whose parents are really coaching them professionally, and I think that that's great. But yes, if any listeners are in that situation like I was in, I'm hoping to just share some insights which may be useful.
That would be good. That would be, so does that mean, all right, so what would be number one then? Find a mentor?
Well, that is one of them, definitely. So
Mhm.
find a mentor, yeah, or some kind of role model. You see, I found one way too late, and I'm talking really late. I think it also is the result of the fact that I'm an only child, so I didn't even have an older sibling or anything like that to look up to or guide. So I, like I said, I understood intellectually to find a mentor or to get advice from people.
Mhm.
But I was so used to beavering away and just figuring things out on my own, which obviously has its own benefits as well.
Mhm.
But when you find a mentor who can help you make decisions, who can guide you on a particular path, who can just make some suggestions, whether you listen to them or not, but make some suggestions, it really does fast track your progress
Mhm.
by a lot. So I wasn't even seeking out a mentor when one kind of just came into my life
Mhm.
in my late 30s, so really quite late in my
Wow.
career.
Okay. Mhm.
And I didn't realize what a profound impact it could have. So when I finally had a mentor, and I realized I was going in leaps and bounds as opposed to little step by step by step by step by step, I became a fan of the experience and realized that I needed mentors or coaches or role models in every aspect of my life, or in every, sort of little area that I wanted to advance in. And so if you don't have a mentor, if you're starting out in your career and you don't have a mentor, that is one of the number one things that I think would be a useful thing for you to do. You're not going to get one overnight, but you could seek out a mentor.
Right.
Now, the thing is, a mentor could be someone, a real life person that you catch up with, or there's kind of different levels of mentor. There's number one, a mentor that you might pay, but if you're starting out in your career, chances are you might not have the spare cash to pay someone. But that's okay, because there are countless more established people, more senior people in the world who want to give back, who want to mentor somebody without payment. So it's potentially identifying some of those and suggesting having a coffee with them, every couple of months or every quarter or something like that. You don't have to meet on a weekly basis or anything, just to sound out some ideas and your direction in life and that sort of thing. And you might ask, well, what are they going to get out of it? You'll be surprised. People who are more established do want to give back to the younger generation if they feel that the person they're speaking to is taking on board what they're saying. They don't even have to necessarily take all of the advice on board, but who are appreciating what they're saying and potentially acting on it. But just remember that it is a two-way street. You need to say thank you to your mentor. You might not be able to give anything back professionally, but you can send a thank you card. You can send a token little small gift, or just something very small, but that acknowledges their contribution, because they've given up their time for free for you, in their life. And that's when you establish really good relationships, and mentors can really open some doors for you as well. So if you're not quite at that stage as well, you might have a role model. And the thing is, a role model, if you don't have a role model in your family, like your parent or an uncle or an auntie, or, somebody in your personal life, that's okay. You can potentially have a role model who you admire from afar, and you can be modeling some of your decisions or some of your pathways on what that role model has done, or not. But you don't have to know the role model, is my point. Some people might pick Steve Jobs. Some people might pick the founder of, this, that, or the other. You don't have to have met your role model. You can just study them. Yeah. So, and it doesn't have to be one person. You might be interested in a whole range of people, because that person might be really good in business. That person might be really good in the way they conduct their creative life. That person might be good in the way they conduct their, philanthropic efforts. You can have a variety of role models who you study, read their books or listen to their podcasts, listen to interviews that they've done, and read their social media, and be able to model the things you admire in your own life.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think for sure mentors and role models are a fantastic thing.
But how do you pick one though? Like, how do you know if a mentor is going to be the right fit for you, or if you're any good at what they did?
The thing is, you don't have to overthink it. You might meet somebody or identify somebody. Like if you meet somebody who you just kind of go, I really resonate with this person, or I find them really interesting. I think that's the key thing. You don't even have to know a great deal about them, but you find them really interesting. I mean, what's a coffee, right? And make sure that if you're asking them to coffee, you pay for the coffee, which isn't very expensive, and send them a thank you. What's a coffee? It's not like you've invested a heap of time or anything like that. Don't overthink it. You may not. After your first coffee, you might go, that was amazing. I would really love to schedule another one in 3 or 4 months. Or you might go, oh, that was really interesting, but, maybe they're not the right fit for me. That's okay. Move on. You don't have to sit there for 6 months choosing somebody and ensuring that you pick the right one. It's something that will just work out naturally for you. And don't overthink it. Just go with, oh, that has really piqued my interest. I'm going to take that one step further. And then you either take it another step further or you don't. But all you've invested is a coffee and an hour of your time, or 45 minutes of your time or something.
Well, that makes sense. So you mentioned that your first mentor was in your mid-30s. How
Late
come
30s.
late 30s? Oh, there
So
you go.
late.
And the mentor found you instead of the other way around. So why didn't you go looking for a mentor in the first place?
Why didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
I always understood, like I said, intellectually the concept of a mentor, but I just never. Because no one had this conversation with me. No one told me how incredibly valuable it would be. I knew, what they were. I knew some people had them, but I don't know, it wasn't in my frame of reference. And I wish it was. I wish somebody had said, this is one of the single most useful things that will help you in life. Go do it. But
So
that
mentorship, the value of mentorship is one that you have to experience to understand. Is that what you're saying?
I think so, or, or
Mm,
or trust somebody who's telling you
mm,
I should try it out, and try it out sooner rather than later. And that's what I'm trying to tell everyone now. Try it out sooner rather than later so that you can experience, whether it's worthwhile to you or not. And if the minimum you got out of it at your first coffee is just a really interesting conversation, that's great too. You had a really interesting conversation.
Beautiful. All right. Well, so what's number two?
So, one of the mantras that I live by
Mm-hmm.
is do what you love and the money will follow. Because, particularly in some cultures, and our parents really instill into us that you need to get a high paying job and you need to, follow something that's secure financially and secure in terms of, your job and stuff like that. And certainly, a lot of that was instilled in me as well. But fortunately, I did learn very early. I just knew it in my bones, to be honest, that I wanted to do what I love. And I believed in my bones. No one actually told me this, actually, that the money would work itself out or would be good if I did what I love and enjoyed it. And I think that's because when I was 16, I remember this. I remember my mother telling me, whatever job you pick, always pick the one that's going to be the most stable or the most high paying or relatively high paying, and this is the kicker. She said to me, no matter what job you pick, you will always hate it in the end. So you may as well pick the one that pays the most. You will always hate it because it's a job. And at the age of 16, that was slightly depressing um, advice. But I also kind of instinctively knew that doesn't make sense. That can't be right. I do not want to spend 8 hours a day, a third of my life, on something that I hate. So initially I did go into a job that was not my favorite job. It was not one that I wanted to do, probably for those reasons. But I soon realised that I was miserable. I mean, I didn't realise it, and it was It was painfully obvious that I was miserable. I got to every Sunday night and felt sick because I knew I had to go to work the next day. I felt actually physically sick and did not want to go to work next day. It was a terrible feeling, and I knew that I had to find a job that I really loved so that I would be excited. So I took all of the steps to be able to do that. And when I finally got there, I honestly could not believe I was being paid to to do what I was doing. It was the most exhilarating, wonderful feeling to be able to wake up each day and absolutely love what I was going to do that day, or everything that I did that day. And so what happened was I initially joined an accounting firm. I became an accountant.
Mhm.
And while I don't regret my studies in that, that was, a valuable, I learned a lot of valuable stuff. And I did get to the stage where I felt sick every Sunday
Mm.
night. And so I knew that I wanted to do something in the world of writing.
Yep.
Because I'd always, loved writing at school. I loved books. I just loved writing. And I always had dreamed of having a job in a magazine, writing for magazines. And so I eventually moved out of accounting, and I started doing some studies in journalism. And I thought to myself, okay, this writing isn't a real job. It's what other people do, And I was always brought up, this is not the fault of my parents. This was just the fault of the environment I was in at the time. And, the discussion that still goes on in the arts industry. I was always instilled in me to think that writers are poor and, live on grants and, next to the poverty line. And I didn't want to be poor. I knew that. And so I thought, well, I can't be a writer. But I just loved it so much, right? So I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to be a writer. I don't want to be poor. I moved into, I started writing on the side just because I had an income from my job. I started writing on the side just as a hobby and, getting paid for small little things, but that wasn't a full-time wage or anything like that. And I thought, you know what I could do? There's accounting, or in the corporate world, there's writing. I'm going to be in the middle. And I thought what I could do is bridge the gap and go into PR, because PR, there's communication skills, there's some level of writing, but it's still a corporate kind of job, corporate career. So I went into PR for a while thinking that this would satisfy my need for a stable income and a career path, but also have a foot in the writing world. And I did do that for a couple of years and enjoyed it. But then I just knew something was missing, and I always had that inkling, that itch inside me. I've really got to try writing full time. And I literally woke up one day, 1 September, and I thought, I've actually just got to give it a go. If I don't give it a go, I'll always wonder if I could make it in the world of writing. And I woke up with this decision, and I did everything in my power I wrote to everyone, I researched people, I talked to people, did everything I could to get into the world of writing. And 1 month later, I got like the job of my dreams as a feature writer for a magazine, for a glossy magazine. And I thought all my Christmases had come at once, all my dreams came true. And it was the job I had always wanted. But all my worst fears came true as well, because the salary was ridiculously low. It was a massive pay cut for me, massive. And I had a mortgage at the time and, car and, those sorts of things. And it was such a massive salary drop that I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And I realized actually, I just wanted this so badly, and I couldn't afford my mortgage with it. I sold my property because I couldn't afford, I wouldn't be able to service the mortgage. And I sold my property, but I knew it was the right decision in my gut. And I loved going to work every single day, loved it. And the reason I say do what you love and the money will follow is that was a short-term sacrifice. I didn't know necessarily, but I hoped it was a short-term sacrifice. And it was a sacrifice, got rid of the car, got rid of the mortgage, all this kind of stuff, because it had been instilled in me to buy a property really as soon as you can. And I did that job. And because I loved it, I did well in it, and I really enjoyed it. And, I made connections. And within 6 months, I was offered another job because I attacked it with such passion and such, vigor. Other people obviously saw that. Within 6 months, I was offered another job, and I ended up being on 3 times that salary.
Wow.
So, it was a very short-term sacrifice to then get ahead financially, to take the risk and do the thing that I
You
absolutely
love.
loved and threw myself into. So I knew I had made the right decision. I was affirmed,
Mm-hmm.
validated when I got offered this job that was on way higher salary than this one. And I took the job, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and, was able to then build up enough to buy another property and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I truly believe that if you do what you love, it might sometimes take a short-term sacrifice. The sacrifice might not be financial. The sacrifice might be time. Maybe you will keep your full-time job and maybe you'll just dedicate weekends pursuing the thing you love.
But surely there's an element of the fact that you do really well too, right? I mean, yes, you love it, but you've also got to be good at it. Or are you saying that it's because you love the job that you dedicate so much of your time and effort into becoming really good at that job?
I believe if you do what you love, it's not a job. If you actually love it, you will do it. Like I said, I could not believe I was getting paid. I would have paid someone to do
To do
my
that
job.
job.
You know what I
Wow.
mean? I loved
Okay.
it that much that I would have done it 24 hours a day if I could have. Well, not quite, but, and because you throw yourself into it and you become good at it quicker because you're spending more time in it, you will excel in it. So if you're actually doing something you love, it's just going to fuel you to learn more and do more, and you will fast track your learning and progress if you are genuinely doing something you love as opposed to something that you think you should love.
And what's the
So
difference? That's a very, very it's very nuanced, isn't it? Something that you think you love versus something you love. Can you explain the difference between the two?
something that you love is something that you genuinely and in your gut know that you have a passion for or interest in. And I think the best benchmark is, would you do this even if you weren't being paid?
Gotcha.
Would you
Yeah.
do this for free? And if the answer is yes, then that's something that you probably truly love. But if it's something that you like and you're good at it, and you think, I should do that because everyone's telling me that that's what I'm good at. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you love it. And some people, they're smart and they're talented. They're good at lots of things. So it can be challenging sometimes when you're good at something to think, oh, I'm good at it, I should follow that. But that's fine. You might be good at it, but do you also love it?
And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make. It usually is a path of least resistance, right? You go into something because you're good at it. You go into something because it pays a little bit more, and then eventually ended up somewhere that you never intended,
Exactly.
somewhere down the line. And I know a lot of people who fall into that trap, myself included. So that is definitely a very good lesson. So number 2 is that you do what you love, and the money will follow. What's the
Yeah.
next lesson?
Well, that your first career, especially for, younger people who are listening to this, may be the first of many, and they could be many different careers, right? So gone are the days where I was talking to somebody the other day and he's worked at the same firm for 30 years. So not even the same career, but the same firm, right?
Wow.
But these days, I think that it is pretty normal. Not it's of course people know it's very normal to have different jobs, but it's also important to keep your mind open that you may have different careers and they may be vastly different. I know people who are lawyers and they're now chiropractors
Wow.
and I've gone from accounting to PR to journalism to fashion design to keynote speaking to being an artist to running your own business. And I think that the important thing is to listen to to give into your creative curiosity. So the thing, as I've said before, the thing that piques your interest, go down that path and just see where it leads. Go down that rabbit hole. It may not lead anywhere. You may, if you're interested, say, in songwriting, I'm just picking that out of the air, do a short course in songwriting. After it, you may discover, actually, I'm really not into it. And that's okay. What have you invested? A few weekends maybe, or not even.
Yep.
But you may discover, I really like this. I'd like to do a little bit more. And it is through that process of experimentation and that process of giving yourself exposure to other things that are outside of your regular
Mm,
environment that often you will stumble on the things that you are truly meant to do.
yeah,
And we
great.
can only do that if we
Mhm,
give ourselves that exposure to those other things.
mhm.
And you
But
don't have to do a uni course or anything. Sometimes they're very short, they're very small investments of time.
gotcha. But okay, so just throwing it out there as a devil's advocate, I mean, if you
Mm.
were to specialize in what you do, right? Don't you have to be very specialized in what you do in order to get, I suppose, far in your career? You know, isn't the idea to do something really, really well that you become so good at it? That's how you get far in your career. If you're trying to dabble in all sorts of different things, you'd be a bit of a jack of all trades but not master of none. Don't you find yourself a bit more? Isn't that a bit more risky for your career?
Sure. But the thing is that, I mean, it's true that if you have a technical expertise,
Hmm.
then you, like in certain aspects of coding,
Hmm.
let's just say, if you have a technical expertise, for sure. But it depends if you want to go down the path of being the expert on a technical sense,
Hmm.
because potentially you may want to instead be CEO of the IT company, and you employ the people with the technical expertise. So it depends on what your goals are. So the
Gotcha. Yeah.
answer is different to different people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And also, the other thing, obviously, is that as technologies develop, as the world change, the careers that exist now probably didn't even exist 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So be open to that. Be open to that opportunity as well. I mean, I bet you, nobody thought they were going to be a professional podcaster
Yeah.
back in the back in the 80s, or even
Yes.
even 20 years ago. I don't think many people would be thinking about doing podcasting as a profession, but here we are today. So
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. It's important to stay
mm,
open, and I think that we can often professionally be stuck in our particular industry or
mm,
in our particular, technical world. I'm a big believer in experiencing and understanding other industries,
mm,
because often it's from the other industries that you can get the light bulb moment and
mm,
and apply it to your own career as well. So I think that's super important, is to be widely read and
mm.
and open to other ideas that are outside of your industry, because that can sometimes be the thing that's going to help you innovate in what you're doing.
Absolutely. I'm seeing a bit of a theme here. And, we always hear about this famous story of how Steve Jobs decides to drop into calligraphy class. and that's
Exactly.
and that's why we have beautiful fonts on computers today. So that's a great lesson. So that your first career could be the first of many. So what's number 4?
Number 4, oh yes, so this is a mantra that I
Mhm.
really, really believe in, is your genius is what comes naturally to you. Now, I'll expand on that.
Mhm.
So your genius, it's what comes naturally to you, is about the fact that we are often told, and I learnt this very late in life, and I wish somebody had told me a lot earlier as well, is that we're often told that, okay, well, you've got 98 in maths, that's really good, you do really well in maths, but you've got 83, oh my god, 83 in chemistry, you need tuition in chemistry, right? Or so we're often
Yeah.
told that we find our weaknesses and improve on our weaknesses. You got a B in piano, so play for another 10 hours a week, an additional 10 hours a week, so you can get a B plus or an A, right?
Yeah.
So it is, we're often told, and I'm all for self-improvement, don't get me wrong, but sometimes we can get caught up too much in that a mindset, and we spend all of this time, this extra time, on the stuff we're not naturally good at in an attempt to be naturally good at it, when
Mhm.
if we spent that time on the stuff we're already good at, that extra 10 hours on the stuff we're already good at. Imagine how stratospheric we could progress or improve if we're investing our time in something that we already have a natural talent for. You could go through the roof. So I'm not saying, I'm not saying don't study for the things that you're not great at. I'm just saying that in life, after you get through uni and stuff, in your career, sometimes identifying the stuff you're really good at and really throwing yourself into it, like I said, doing what you love you throw yourself into it. It doesn't even feel like work. Not only will you enjoy it more, you'll improve at a much faster rate because it's something that comes naturally to you.
Yep.
So I encourage people to sometimes think, okay, yes, I could work on this, and don't get me wrong, this does not apply to shirking responsibility for something. If you actually committed to being responsible for something, I'm not saying, oh, that doesn't come naturally to you and therefore you shouldn't do it. If you've committed to something that you need to be responsible for, yes, you need to do everything in your power to deliver on what you are responsible for. I'm just saying that in your choices in life, sometimes you might, a good example is, once I wanted to create an app and I thought, well, I don't know how to create an app. So I bought books on how to create an app and to code and stuff like that. Other times I thought, okay, I need to do my tax. I'll read the tax legislation and figure it out and spend hours on the phone with the tax department to figure out how to apply this particular ruling in my business. That is not a good use of my time, and that is not my area of genius. So now I pay app developers. Now I pay the tax consultant, or whatever. I still cannot believe that I bothered to buy a book thinking, oh, I'll learn to code over the Christmas break. It's ridiculous, delusional as well.
That makes perfect sense, actually. If you think about it, the metaphor I'll give is the sports team, right? You look at the different star players, and my favorite sport is basketball. So interestingly, everyone has a different job. Certain people are better at scoring, certain people are better at the defense, certain people are better at rebounding. But the star players have something to hang their hats on. It's the one thing that they're known for. And yes, they have to do a bit of everything else as well, just because that's the way the sport is. But you have to have something to hang your hat on. Whatever it is that you do to make you stand out. And you're absolutely right, because what will happen is they'll have other players that do certain other things well to come and complement you. So in the team environment, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right. I suppose the other thing, though, that came to my head was this, and this could be a bit of the Asian programming that you and I have that we might not be aware of, and that is, there seems to be this belief that anything that is hard, anything that's worth doing is going to be hard. So this idea of sort of overcoming, and anything that's worth of value, you have to, sort of exert a whole lot of effort for, which, I suppose there's truth in that. But certainly they're a better use for your time, isn't there?
Definitely. And there are pros and cons to that thinking. I was certainly raised with that thinking as well. And that's kind of been able to stand me in good stead because I've done so many things that are hard. and so when it comes to a really major or overwhelming project, I just put my head down and work through it. And so that's really useful. But like I said, I discovered later in life, gee, you could actually work really hard on something that is, you could spend a lot of time on something that you love so much that comes naturally to you and it doesn't seem hard. So
No, that's true. But what about the things that you consider as tickets of the game? So, for example, if you could be a brilliant, let's say I know a brilliant data scientist, but he struggles with basic communications. He's got brilliant ideas. It's all up here. He can't seem to get it out. Should he work hard to at least work on this communication just so that people could appreciate his brilliance? Or is that something that's, not worth his time and you should just basically double down on his data science?
Yeah. It depends on what he wants out of his life and career, right?
Mhm.
If it's actually important, if where he wants to get to
Mhm.
is a place that values good communication skills, and if he deeply desires getting to that point, then the answer is yes, he should be working on that. But that may not be where he wants to get to. He
Mhm.
may simply want to be the great genius that just focuses on the technical aspect that somebody else translates. But then he needs to work on finding that somebody.
Mm.
So he
Right.
can still
Okay.
just do what he wants, but if he wants his ideas to get out there, he needs to find that somebody who will be the conduit. Yeah.
Yep.
So it really depends on what his goals are.
So what you're saying is that it's okay to have weaknesses so long as you have ways of working with others to, I suppose, overcome your weaknesses. So part of it is not no, it's not putting into effort that that you are. I suppose what you're saying is that you're not wasting effort in overcoming those weaknesses by finding more efficient ways to do that. And meanwhile, you should be focusing on things which, if you spend even more effort on, could really make you just off the charts in terms of your your genius.
Absolutely. So another way of looking at your the time that you might be spending on your weaknesses is to
Mm.
delegate them.
Delegating your weaknesses. I like
Well,
that. Yeah.
delegate the responsibility that
Your weak.
requires that effort. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. That's a genius. And so that brings us to number 5.
Mm.
Mhm.
So number 5 is that, and it might be stating the obvious, but
Mhm.
again, it took me a long time to really get this. Building your career is all about building relationships. It's
Mhm.
actually not about the marks you get at uni. It's not about how good you perform at work.
Mhm.
It's not about, how many clients you bring in or whatever. It's all about relationships.
Mhm.
And not only relationships with your customers or clients, whatever, but relationships with your team, relationships with your bosses, relationships with your boss's bosses. And yes, really, that's a discussion about the political environment in the workplace.
Mhm.
And it's something that I always knew about, but it took me again till my 30s to really get it, because I guess no one really explained to me how it really worked and the mechanics of politics and the importance of the impact of it on your career. So yeah, it's never about how good you are.
Mhm.
It's never just about how good you are.
How
Of
good you
course,
are.
you
Yep.
need to be competent in your job and all of that.
Mhm.
It's never about just what you know. It is very much about relationships, because people will make decisions based on whether or not they like you,
Mhm.
or whether or not they feel they can work with you, or whether or not they feel you will work with a team. And because there are countless people who have the same skills,
Mhm.
it boils down to an interpersonal fit. So if you think that it's all just based on your skills, you will only get so far, a certain, you know, level,
Mhm.
or a certain place in a corporation or an organization. But if you realize it's that plus the interpersonal skills, the sky's the limit.
Gotcha. So when you say you weren't aware of the politics, right? I mean, what did you think it was back in the 20s? Like, how do you think it worked back in the 20s, and what changed?
I knew intellectually that you had to get along with people. I figured that out. But I think that I placed too much emphasis. I did hard work,
Mhm.
and I put too much emphasis on if I just produced the right results.
Mm.
Whereas if I did that and realized, well, there's actually a whole sea of people that I need to establish relationships with,
Mhm.
um, it would have made much more sense.
All right. So if you were to describe the approach you're taking today versus what you're taking back then, how would you go about a problem differently?
I think that in my 20s,
Hmm.
uh, even though I worked hard,
Hmm.
if I thought, just to give you an example,
Hmm.
if I thought something was a dumb idea, I'd just say so. Whereas now I would be way more diplomatic because for a
Right.
whole range of reasons, even if I might internally think it's not the brightest idea on earth. First of all, I'd be more open to the idea. But if I don't actually think it's a great idea, you know, you can hurt someone's feelings. You can make someone feel crap. You can,
Hmm.
your comment could be taken out of context.
Hmm.
I think that I think about those things a lot more than I did in my 20s.
Okay, so diplomacy, I can certainly understand. But you made a really interesting comment about how people make decisions based on how they think one person could work with another,
Mm.
or with a group, or whether they like you. But how, in a practical sense, how can you really influence how other people feel about you?
How can you? Oh, um, even just simple things like listening.
Mm,
If you're having an engagement, simple things like listening, simple things like acknowledging that you've heard what the person has said, simple things like sending a thank you email or thank you card after you've had a coffee with somebody. People remember that.
mm,
So they are small, small, tiny, tiny token gestures.
mhm,
um, Even making eye contact.
mhm. Yep.
They're such small things, but they can certainly give that extra 1% and then an extra 1% and an extra 1% that will put you ahead of somebody else who doesn't do those things.
Gotcha. So interpersonal skills are obviously very, very important. And it just takes time to perfect that and just be at that next level of awareness of how you're perceived by people who you may not be aware of how they, how they're going to impact you. I suppose, that you're actually thinking more far and wide. It's not just about your immediate manager. It's about how you're perceived, by the senior management, by people outside the organization, by those around you, and by, your peers and your peers' staff and everyone else as well. So
Yeah.
that, yeah. Okay.
And the thing is, some people may not have that awareness.
Mm.
If, just may not be wired to know how they are perceived.
Hmm.
And I know somebody who is like that. She actually has no awareness that she may be appearing abrupt, or that she may, be saying things that the other person might think, oh,
Hmm.
that's that's very direct,
Hmm.
and but she recognizes that.
Mm.
So she instead has got coaching in, she knows that she's not going to develop that gene. She knows that she still, doesn't understand that, but instead she recognizes enough people have told me that this is how I'm perceived. So I'm just going to work with a set of rules. I don't know how many rules there are, but let's just say it's a set of 5 rules. So if she's listening, she
Hmm.
will make a point to listen, and visually if you're looking at this in the video, she's leaning forward. She might have a rule to send a thank you email after a particular kinds of meetings. So she
Gotcha.
may
Yep.
not actually genuinely feel those things,
Hmm.
but she has the enough awareness to know that people perceive her in that way, even if she doesn't even understand why.
Hmm.
She has her set of rules to help people feel better about their interactions with her.
Gotcha. But that seems to be like almost the opposite set of problems as what a typical person of the Asian culture would have, right? Which is generally, rather than being too abrupt, they tend to be too timid or too passive. Often they don't really speak up even when they have very valuable things to say, things that they can really contribute to a discussion. And
Mm,
oftentimes they tell themselves that, what I have to say is of no value. right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you correct yourself the other way? I suppose, what if you have the opposite problem of being, too conformist or
Sure.
being too passive? Like, is there a way of somehow changing that as well?
So I think that in a situation like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's important to understand that people may not actually perceive you as timid, or they might, but they could perceive you as disinterested.
Mm,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep.
And so even if you don't, step one is, if you don't yet have the confidence to voice an opinion,
Mm-hmm.
at least affirm someone else's that you agree with.
Mm,
So at least take a baby step into making a comment. Oh, I think that John had a really good idea about XYZ, whatever XYZ was.
mm-hmm.
So that's just taking a baby step. And then the step after that, once you're confident in that, is you might say, I think John had a really good idea. I also think it's a really good idea because of ABC. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So just take very small baby steps, starting off with, if you don't have the confidence to express your own opinion, at least try to agree with somebody else's that so that you become part of the conversation. You don't become known as the person who just doesn't care because you're not
mm.
speaking.
Absolutely. Now that's some very, very valuable advice and appreciate. So let's do a quick recap. Find a mentor. Number one,
Mm,
find a mentor. Number two, do what you love and the money will follow. Number
yes,
three, your first career may be the first of many. Number
yes.
four, your genius is what comes naturally to you. And number five, building your career is all about relationships. Thank you so much, Val. That's been a very interesting discussion, and no doubt we'll be talking to you more. And hopefully we'll have a session soon with the live crowd.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.